Look what I just received, a wedding invite.
Well, what's so miserable about that?
It's an invite to my own wedding.
What?
Listen to this. Dear Madam, you is hereby cordially invited to attend the nuptials of your own sweet, well-put-together self, and that ever-popular champagne dirty wrestler of the world, namely me, Earthquake Magoon.
Earthquake Magoon?
Dinner, RSVP.
What's that mean?
When you has dinner with Earthquake Magoon, RSVP means only one thing. Roast skunk, very possible.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. Today we're talking about Little Abner from 1959.
This is the film Little Abner. The film
Yes. I'm your host Kumar. My co-host is Jordan.
Hello.
As always. It almost wasn't always because this was the episode, as I was going through the list, and I thought, I want to do this one early for whatever reason. I thought I'll ask my buddy Tim Young over at Deconstructing Comics if he wants to do this one. And you seem so crestfallen at the idea of not being able to talk about Little Abner for some reason.
Well, I didn't know anything. I'm so glad I didn't miss this opportunity because, wow, Little Abner. It's not a thing that had ever crossed my radar before.
Okay, so what I'll say is I actually know of or have read a chunk of most of the classic strips.
Right.
Except for Little Abner. Now, Little Abner started in 1934, and I only knew it by reputation. Never actually, I thought, before we started the episode, I thought I had, but I was actually thinking of, like, Alley-Oop or something like that, and I hadn't actually read any Little Abner. But you Google around, and the first thing you discover about it is that Capp, who started the strip in 1934, was apparently a monster. Horrible human being, apparently. Oh. And, but a genius. He's a bit like the Salvador Dali of comics, maybe. So, apparently he's a totally awful guy. Well, there's two sides
He's
to
been
it.
me too. Look, he contains multitudes like many people, doesn't he?
Yes, that's right. So he was the one that actually got women to be allowed into the Cartoonists Association of America, or whichever one it is.
Yes.
But also he was just the worst.
Yes. As you said, he was progressive. He was kind of progressive in his youth. He had a missing leg. And was apparently quite active on the part of amputees and the disabled. Right. Apparently gave anonymously to various charities.
Right.
He pushed for the inclusion of women in the Comics Writers Association.
Something like that,
occurred in 1949 or 1950, I think, women were first admitted. But he's been Me Too'd.
Right.
So this is not even recently, but he was tried and I think maybe convicted of sexual assault in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah. And he also became more and more conservative. Not that conservatism equals evil, but he became more and more conservative as he got older. A famous stoush with John Lennon, which when John Lennon was doing that thing in the bed.
Yeah, the lie-in or whatever, the bed-in or whatever they were calling it.
It's a complex man.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me
as far as
of,
comics is concerned, a giant apparently. From what I've been
absolutely,
able to find out.
And Little Abner, as much as you might not have heard of it, especially in Australia, in North America at least, I mean the term Sadie Hawkins is in common use for a type. You have a Sadie Hawkins dance at your school. That means it's a dance where the girls ask the boy. And this is like it's in the general lexicon.
Sure.
The thing what I knew about Little Abner before was only that it was great, but repetitive. So certain aspects of it became such huge hits, like the Sadie Hawkins thing, that every November he would have to do the Sadie Hawkins storyline.
Yep.
And I would say from what I read, he was amazing, but he wasn't quite at Charles Schultz level where he could do the Great Pumpkin every Halloween and have it be really great every time.
Okay.
My understanding is it just became the same thing again and again, kind of.
Well, it did run for more than 40 years.
Yes. Well, that's the other thing about it, too, is that he had a lot of assistants. So, and a lot of ghosts. And most famously, Frank Frazetta.
Right, I read that.
For a while was on there. You can kind of tell with the Frank Frazetta ones because Daisy May looks especially good in them.
Yeah.
But there were, so sometimes you're not really sure what, if you're actually reading an Al Capp comic later on.
Right. I did read that he still was. I read that he was quite active involved in them nonetheless. I think he always did the faces and hands, I read.
Yeah.
And I think unusually for the time, at least when he was a younger man, he was quite vocal about the fact that he used, how you say, he had
studio staff.
Studio assistant.
Yeah.
He would acknowledge them, not in the comic itself, but publicly.
Yeah.
Apparently he was quite a public figure as well. He appeared frequently on television. He was a talking head. He hosted talk shows.
Yes, and you can
as soon as you start googling him, there's just all this, and I'd never heard of him.
There's in the comics. So we're going to talk about. So you can just go. We just have to go online. If you go onto gocomics.com, and you can actually press go to the start. And you can read the first 6 months or so of Little Abner, and then it stops. It just kind of stops. So that's the 1934, probably 6 months or 18 months. I can't remember how much, but it just kind of stops dead. And what I find with the old strips, the classic strips especially, you want to start reading about 5 years into it, because the guys are drawing every day, and they start to get so good. We'll see it especially with Little Orphan Annie, Dick Tracy. Alex Raymond, Flash Gordon, all that stuff. When you get about the 5 year mark, the art just gets really, everything, the wheels are just running perfectly.
Okay.
But it's very scratchy early on, so you can only read that kind of stuff, quote unquote, legally. But if you Google it, you can find most of the comics issues, which were recut, like the Sundays recut, into comic book format.
Yes.
So there's a bit of.
They do repeat themselves.
There are some hiccups where you see somebody repeat the same thing 2 panels in a row because it was last week's Sunday and the first panel
and
next
they're doing a
week.
recap. Yes.
Okay, so what's online? It starts with issue 61 from
Sadie
Harvey.
Hawkins Day.
Yeah. For some reason it starts at 61. I guess because Harvey. I don't think Harvey's the name on the cover. I don't know if it was the actual. I think I did pull this up somewhere. Maybe I still have it. Anyway, they were. So it might have been Comics on Parade, which had a different feature every few issues. They'd have feature a different strip in reprints, and they were doing Little Abner every third issue, and apparently 58 was the previous one, and then from issue 61 it permanently became all Little Abner all the time. But even the Comics Database GCD Online is not really sure. They're just speculating about that.
I see.
But, so this was the first, so issue 61 is the first Sadie Hawkins. It's from 1946.
Okay.
And
that's the first Sadie. That can't be the first one.
I think it is because they explain.
Oh, perhaps it is. Look,
Okay, well, anyway, it's.
This is a famous one because it has
Lena
the hyena.
Okay, so we were talking about his celebrity because there's a storyline in here where, for some reason, these celebrity judges are judging which of these fan submissions and pro cartoonists were submitting to this contest as well. So this character that is so ugly that Al Capp doesn't draw her. He never shows her face.
She's astonishingly ugly, right? Never shown.
Yeah, and she's from some Soviet country somewhere.
Lower Slovenia, I think it's Slovenia or Lower Slovenia.
Slav something.
They're all waist deep in snow all the time.
Yeah.
And the bane of their existence is Lena the hyena. So they have a lottery where you get to emigrate from Lower Slovenia if you win the lottery.
Right.
The lottery is won by an old man. And he says in his comical East European / Russian phonetic accent, because all of this is written in this amazing phonetic accent, he says, well, I'll give up my place to Lena, and we'll get rid of her, and then we'll all be happier. So poor Lena gets sent to the US where no one's willing to take her in except the good-hearted folk of Dogpatch.
Dogpatch USA, which the hillbillies of the Little Abner clan. So there's a contest so people are allowed to, fans and professional cartoonists, as I said, including Carl Barks, and the person who famously won it was Basil Wolverton, who is one of my all-time favorite artists.
It's an amazing picture.
Yeah. So
I've seen it. I couldn't have told you what it was, but I've seen that.
You've seen the image, right? So, the contest is judged by Salvador Dali, Boris Karloff, and Frank Sinatra in the comic, but also in real life.
I didn't know that detail. That's amazing.
So in real life, they were judging this
so incredible.
contest and chose this Basil Wolverton.
So Al Capp must have been quite at the height of his fame at this point.
I think a few of those guys those cartoonists were in the 50s and 60s. I think it was possible to be a newspaper cartoonist and become
he certainly
a bit of a national celebrity.
And he must have... because you read online about Little Abner, and it was enormous. Like we were talking about Friday Foster, which I think ran in half a dozen newspapers. This one ran in like hundreds.
Yeah,
hundreds. It was read by 60 million people a week at the height of its readership, when the population of the United States was about 180 million.
Yeah, and it might have. I wonder if it's still going, because a lot of those strips are, like Dick Tracy is still going.
It's not still going. I read as much as that, I don't think. I think there's been talks about reviving it, but I don't think it's ever been successfully revived. Citation needed.
Okay.
But this competition to draw the face of Lino Hyena, the celebrity judges, he must have been at the height of his powers and fame.
And he's also so the strip itself, I'm surprised I haven't read them before, because I just thought they were awesome.
Yeah, we'll talk about the strip. Yeah,
they were just so funny beginning to end.
Yeah.
Every gag, I just couldn't believe it, and the storylines never really... They kind of changed course in a way that I wasn't expecting. Like, the second after the Sadie Hawkins, we get this one where Lil Abner's mother does this fortune-telling ritual and sees that he shouldn't shake hands with anybody. And you think... And then he goes through this whole storyline where he's not shaking hands and he's become outcast by Dog Patch.
He's a pariah because because of their...
Yeah, and he gets in all these hilarious situations, but that's not what it's about. It's about this famous opera singer or of some sort that he's in love with, that Abner has a kind of screen crush on, and they show films of her in the little Dog Patch cinema. And she actually, their train is coming through town, and her agent has arranged for her to stop and shake hands. So he's like, Mom, I gotta have this one exception. You gotta let me shake hands. And also, I can't do the accents. Every character has this kind of...
Every character.
Phonetic.
No matter where they're from.
And it's so funny and great. And then it turns out that she's like, the actual woman, I can't remember her name, but she's like, I don't want to stop in this hodunk town. So they, due to some, some madcap slapstick, her dress mannequin tips out the window, and Abner grabs her hand and assumes he's shaking the actual singer's hand, and as the train pulls away from the station, pulls the dummy out. The dummy crashes on the ground. They assume that it's
her and that
she's stunned, because the doctor comes along and says her heart ain't beating. In some ways, that's a bad thing. In some ways, that's a bad sign, is what he says. I wrote it down. Her heart ain't beating. In some ways, that's a bad sign. And then he's actually a donkey doctor. He's not an actual human doctor. And he's like, usually with a donkey, that's a bad thing if the heart stops beating or whatever. Anyway, because of the code of the hills, Abner has to marry her. So he ends up married to this mannequin's dummy, but he assumes that she's just stunned. And he has to when he carries around, sometimes he's carrying this dummy upside down, just like he's carrying it like you'd hold a rifle over your shoulder. It's just it's crazy, funniest thing. And then when she finds, and then there's this whole thing where Daisy May, who's the one that's usually pining after Labner, no longer can marry him because he's married this other woman. And then she ends up marrying this other guy who's this Lothario that kind of has this scam going to basically make out with women and then dump them by claiming he's going to marry them, because it's arranged by this guy that arranges meetings and marriages. And so she kind of hooks up with this guy, and then she accidentally... Okay, so then she decides she can't marry him, and he decides he's not going to marry her. So that becomes newsworthy enough to reach the big city newspapers, where this woman reads the article and sees, because it's mentioned in the article that little Abner is married to one of the world's most famous singers, and she freaks out and says, one of the most famous? I'm the most famous. So even she's got every person has some hilarious thing going on, like her arrogance.
Yeah.
Then she comes to town, and then we get a reverse Born Sexy Yesterday trope where she falls in love with this dumb hillbilly, Lil Abner, because he's so macho or whatever, but he's such an idiot. But she's like,
he's very handsome and very well. But
right.
Wait, I'll let you finish the synopsis, then we might have to backpedal a bit.
Yeah, we'll have to. So I have to, because every moment
it's
of this was so great.
It's like a cheese and Worcester
It's
plot.
so great. She figures out. So, sorry, Daisy May discovers by accident that he's actually married to a dummy, not to a real woman.
Yeah.
But he says, even then she says, what does she say? She says he's still legally married to it, is her words. So they're still married, but she decides she's going to burn the dummy. The dummy. She's like, I'm going to throw this thing in the fire. But she goes away first. Meanwhile, the real singer shows up in town, takes the place of the dummy, comes to life, kisses Abner, and then, but when he leaves the room, a horseshoe falls on her head and she gets stunned. So Daisy May pulls out this body, assuming it's a dummy, and puts it on the fire. And every page, I was like, I cannot believe that. This is the craziest thing. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe she just threw this woman on the fire. Then we found out that when she get kindling, there was a body swap or whatever.
I think it was a bit unclear what maybe he couldn't. It was a bit unclear what exactly happened. It was explained well enough.
Yeah, it might have been in the dailies. There might have been more details about what exactly happened in there that we didn't get.
There was a switch, a last minute.
There was a llast minute switch, and then everything works out for the best in the end. Meanwhile, there's all these. I mean, there's a hilarious line where one of the funniest lines is when the guy that does the marriages in town shows up and says, "You can have the $2 blue light special." Or you can have the 95-cent, and he sounds so disgusted himself as he described it, that anyone would choose the 95-cent over the $2 blue light special. He's like, or you can get the 95-cent special. And there's even a line where he says, I'll do the routine in blackface or something, which is offensive, but it's so hilarious coming as a pile-on of all this other stuff he'll do, like he'll do a wrestling routine and all this other stuff that's part of the marriage ceremony if you pay the full $2 or whatever. So, and then there's all the language and all the gags and all
there's
that.
There's alliteration and play on words. They have their little aphorisms and expressions and funny malapropisms.
Yes.
It's very funny, very clever and very funny.
Yeah, what was there was one that kept coming up and I should have written it down. One of the malapropisms. I don't know if there were any that stuck out in your head, but
I can't. I'm also grasping, but I can't remember. But they're just strewn, and some of them. That's right, and they sound quite clever. It's meant to be because they're hicks, but it sounds quite often that it makes them sound very smart, and that's something that we'll talk about that in the film. But we might. It's occurring to me at this point that it's perhaps people listening might not even know what Little Abner is. It's possible. I didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought it was something similar to the Little Rascals. So you can imagine
similar era. But it's about this. Okay, it's about a hillbilly.
It's set in the American South.
Yeah, way up in the hills.
Yes, among the hill people. Yeah.
Yes. Everybody is super grotesque.
Yeah. The art.
Idiots. They're all amazing. Idiots. Yep. Yeah, they're all hunched over in weird ways, or they've got gross faces. They've got weird distorted
They all have the most amazing posture.
Yeah.
They'll be all contorted, their heads way out, long necks, long limbs, curved backs.
Yeah.
They look hilarious. They look really funny.
Yeah.
I don't think it's meant to represent congenital deformity. They just look.
I don't. Well,
they just
only,
look like caricatures.
Not consciously, but surely when people were when Al Capp was thinking, what are hillbillies like, and he was thinking about them being all.
I read he based it partly on he'd done hiking. I don't know how he did that when he only had one leg, but he'd done hiking in, say, the Appalachians or somewhere like that, and he'd met some of these people that lived there before running water and electricity.
Okay.
So I think there might have been New Deal programs.
Right.
And so he presumably did it in the 1920s or something like that, when these people were sort of living in extremely primitive conditions.
Okay. So, except Lil Abner. So Lil Abner is super handsome.
Oh, and a lot of the women.
Yes, well, some of the women.
But some of them are hilariously grotesque, especially the ones that participate in the Sadie Hawkins Day race.
So Daisy May, who pines after him, is is drawn really
Statuesque.
alluringly, and even there's this wolf woman, this cannibal wolf woman who there's actual cannibal. Well, it's not cannibal. She feeds them to her wolves. She captures people.
I read her later one. She actually eats them herself.
Okay,
in
crazy.
A later one.
But yeah, some of the you can tell some of the women are supposed to be are genuinely attractive, but Abner has no interest. That's not really explained.
Well, he doesn't want to. He doesn't. None of the men want to get married.
Right.
They're all terrified of the women.
Well, some of them do. Some of them get married to avoid having to get married.
Yeah, they all don't want to go in the Daisy Hawkins race, which is where the women chase you in a foot race, chase the men. The women chase the men in a foot race, and anyone they catch, they can marry.
Yes,
and
they have to carry them back across the finish line before sundown, I think is the rule.
Something like that.
And the thing is, because this happened once in the past, and that's why they're doing it now, but you're thinking, why would this exist? Why do you have to follow these rules? And it's the law of the hills. Part of it is that these people are so dumb, they're so backwards, they're such backwards mountain people that they follow these. It's like the lottery. I was actually thinking of Shirley Jackson's The Lottery as I was reading this, because it's just kind of like...
That's a grim comparison.
Yeah, it is, but it's just like they just have dumbass rules because they're dumbass people. There's not really a reason for it.
They're all very lazy.
Yes.
Very hidebound.
Yeah.
But none of the men want to get married. Presumably, none of the men want to work. They just want to lounge around and fish.
Yeah.
And the idea of getting married is a horror to many of them, especially the Abner, because it would interfere with, like fishing and wrestling and...
And some of them do get married, but it's only to avoid having to marry the grotesquerie.
Like Lena Hyena,
Yes. Yeah, so nobody wants to get caught by Lena, so they're like, I'll just marry this person and, or whatever. Or...
So it's an I think it's meant to be affectionate. Like, we've used a lot of words like dumb, stupid, lazy, but it wouldn't fly nowadays, of course. But we're talking about the 1930s.
Yeah, but
it's an affectionate parody, and is used as and not just important to point out. This is a satire. This strip. It's not just to make fun of Hicks. Capp uses it to skewer all kinds of people and trends and movements and places. It's a satirical comic.
Yes, I don't think I'd say satire is closer than affectionate, because I think he skewers the rich city folk that show up
exactly. Yeah,
as much.
That's what I mean. The Dogpatch is a vehicle.
Those Soviets are.
It's not a satire of rural life. It's the Dogpatch people, despite being stupid and lazy and hidebound and having no running water and dirty and poor. They, the people that are the objects of his satire are the other figures, the people that wander into their lives, criminals, businessmen, the government, people, the Russians.
Yeah.
And little Abner, of course, is who's after whom the strip is named, is a bit of a he's a pure-hearted, naive person whom people are often trying to flummox or trick, but he comes through it through the the nobility of his heart and the generosity of his spirit.
Yeah, and he tries to pull one over on Lena as well. But then it turns out she wasn't interested in him, because they went to the this mountain man who can tell the future. And
Old Man Moses.
And he's like, whoever has the most to lose is going to be the one that Lena chases.
Yeah.
And they figure it's Abner. But he's actually turns out not to be the richest person in town, so he actually turns out to be safe.
Lena Hyena jumps straight at... Well, he comes up with a convoluted plot to pretend to have his legs stuck in a log.
Yeah.
Because he decides Daisy May is the lesser of two evils, and he decides he'll marry her, which thrills her. So they come up with a scheme that he'll put his foot in a log and pretend to be trapped. And then there's this whole comedy of errors where the lumberjack comes and insists that he has to take the log. He
needs that log whole,
right then and there, intact, for a rush order. And he's perfectly willing to cut off little Abner's leg, but that's as far as he's willing to go.
Right.
And of course, Wolf Girl wants to catch him. Lena the hyena, we assume, wants to catch him. Daisy May wants to catch him. There's all this confusion about who's going to get him. But as you say, Lena ends up going for the richest man in town, who carries all his money in in nickels or something. It's all spilling
Yes,
out of his
that's
pockets
right.
as he runs along.
That's right.
So, all right, okay. So summing up, the comic, it's funny.
It really
It's
it's
clever.
working on every level.
It's well drawn.
It's on the drawing level. The comedic timing of it, like the vaudeville slapstick of it, is all really working. The dialogue.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny. It's mature. Yes, I remember reading it and thinking, I find this really funny. A lot of stuff, a lot of humor from that time, say the 30s and 40s, it doesn't seem funny anymore.
Yeah.
But this is really funny.
Yeah.
It's really, what's the word I want? It's clever.
Yeah, and we didn't even really read that much of it.
No, we just read a couple. I flicked through a few others, but I read the 61 and 62 like you suggested, and I flicked through a few others later on, including one with Evil Eye Flegel.
Right, okay.
It shows up in the movie. But it's just, it's mature. Yeah. And it's got a certain roughness. Yeah. A certain earthiness to it, to the humor.
Yeah, it's earthy, there's something really... I don't know. It's just he just seemed to have a natural talent. It's
very talented.
It was such a great strip.
Yeah, certain. John Steinbeck said that he was the greatest satirist living in America.
Okay.
And Marshall McLuhan also thought that he was. This is just reading his Wikipedia article.
Yeah. Okay, so strip starts in 1934. Then there's a movie in 1940, which is apparently not good. Pretty dire.
Right, yeah, I heard that too.
But I haven't...
They used prosthetics to try and mimic the facial... the physiognomy of the characters. Apparently it looked awful.
I saw a few seconds of it on YouTube and it looked pretty rough.
Right.
It's in black and white. I haven't seen it. Someday we may come around to it on the show. I don't know, but my initial hope was to only do like one of each thing. But we may come around to it.
Well, if it's an excuse to read more Little Abner comics, maybe
yes,
we'll
that would be the main reason, is to read, I want to read 3 or 4 more issues of this at least.
But the movie.
Okay, so then we had a Broadway musical.
Right.
I'm guessing around the mid-50s?
Yes, yes.
And then
mid-50s.
In 1959, we get this movie directed by Melvin Frank. Don't know who that is. Screenplay by Melvin Frank and Norman Panama. Don't know who they are. They might have 100 credits to their names. I just don't know. Okay, so
and this is a film of the musical.
Film of the musical, much like Annie was a film of the musical.
Yeah, well, this is like a big time for that kind of thing. Films of Broadway musicals, like the Sound of Music.
Yeah, and A West Side Story, and I guess they're all kind of similar.
It's around the same time, around the same period. Yeah. My Fair Lady, another one from that time.
Right. Okay, so 1959. So, okay, first thing I want to say before we really get into it is one thing I've already noticed between this and Friday Foster and versus like Snowpiercer is that when you've got a quote-unquote graphic novel, you can just adapt that into a movie.
Yes.
When you get into adapting a strip, which has been running for 70 years, you got to pick and choose your storylines or make up a completely new storyline whole cloth. So we've got a little bit of a mix here. It's a musical, as we mentioned. Now it starts out...
I didn't know it was a musical till it started.
Well,
like, oh my god, it's a musical.
It's a musical. It looks like a musical. All the Dogpatch stuff is very clearly set on a sound stage.
It's. I think.
No, I shouldn't even say clearly.
I think it was a conscious decision to make it look like the Broadway sets.
Yes.
And it's all the Broadway cast, almost all.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah. It's all of the chorus. Most of the starring roles there, because it's all just...
I was thinking that because the dance routines are so elaborate that I was like, whoa, if you were hired as an actor and had 2 weeks to rehearse before filming, it would be very difficult.
It was the Broadway cast. I think
that makes
Daisy
sense.
May was recast and Mammy Yoakum was recast. Okay. And I think that's it. Okay. Because the guy that played Lil Abner, he played him on Broadway.
Okay. So it starts, and it's very weird. It's a weird viewing experience. the guy that does the marriages in town comes out.
Marion Sam
comes out and does the same gag about the price of weddings, and it's just dead.
Yes.
It's not like reading in the comic where he's disgusted at that anyone would, that he's offering the 95-cent option, or that anyone would choose it even though he's offering it. It's just like, he rattles off. The accents are not... It's not the same. It's just fake. It's just fake. Also,
because they have to kind of talk like normal.
The Broadway cast, these people are all very attractive. I don't know why.
That's another. Yes.
They're all everybody's a 10.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Also, because they're not hunched over. You know, they're not.
Mammy and Pappy try, I think, to sort of mimic.
Mammy's probably the best. This
is a podcast, so this is not a visual medium. But she's sort of got her arms and legs up. In a kind of way. I'm doing.
I actually thought she was one of the best actors in the movie for actually bringing some of that that yokel feeling that you're supposed to get, because because you don't, because we get the whole we get the whole thing about Sadie Hawkins in here, but it's like in the comic, you're like, oh yeah, they have this stupid thing because they're all idiots. In the movie, I'm like, these people seem too intelligent to be following the law of the hills and having this.
They don't seem stupid. And in fact, when they say the things that look funny in the comic, some of this alliteration and malapropisms and funny puns and turns of phrase, because those are clever. I read a review, I think on the Wikipedia page, where it said, when you say something funny and clever, you look clever.
Right.
So Marion Sam is saying some of these bits, like in the film, and it makes him sound like some sort of wise, like clever bloke, and he's not supposed to be. They're all supposed to be rubes, and congenitally stupid. And instead, as you say, they're clean of limb. They're really good looking people.
Yeah. And when they go into a song number, they enunciate really well, but they're still speaking in this way, like yous, y'alls, all that stuff is still in the lyrics. In the lyrics of the songs, but the songs are pronounced like somebody from a New York Broadway show.
It absolutely does not work.
Yeah. It's bizarre, but
it doesn't seem anything like this, like the tone of the comic. It's
actually literally one of my notes. This is very early on. My feeling kind of changed as I was watching the movie. It's quite long. It's almost 2 hours.
It's way too long.
It is way too long.
I think it's just. I read the plot of the musical. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
I think it's just scene for scene the same.
But the note I wrote, and probably the first 10 minutes, is it's dumbed down.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about Little Abner being dumbed down, it's like a crazy thing to write.
Well, the rough edges have been sanded off. It's been, I think it's been dumbed down. I think it's been blanded as well.
Yeah.
It's because a lot of some of the more subversive humor and caricatures have been kind of like blanded out. It's still really sex obsessed. It's quite a horny film.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, so we have to mention that at the 40-minute point, once we get through all the plot, which we'll kind of get to, which is a thing to talk about itself, but Julie Newmar shows up.
Stupefying Jones.
As this character called Stupefying Jones. She's basically a robot. She's been manufactured to distract men during the Sadie Hawkins race. This is
I think she might be based on a character from the comics.
Yeah, okay.
Who's the opposite of Lena Hyena.
Right.
So beautiful that she stuns people.
So she comes out and she's basically there to pose and look amazing and look fabulous.
She does look fabulous.
And, okay, as soon as she pops out, we get a 40-second cameo from Jerry Lewis.
I didn't notice that at all.
Oh, yeah. So they use him as, he's the test subject. So it's like, show us how you work, Stupefying Jones, basically. And they bring this guy out who's like totally crazy.
Oh my God.
And he's like, he's stupefied by her. And then they're like, okay, go away now. And he goes off. I can't remember his character's name. And so at one moment, he's the only guy in the movie that I felt that was a Little Abner character. Because he comes out and he's so over-the-top goofball.
Yeah.
For 40 seconds, I was like, that is it. That's who everybody should have been. Yeah. And there's a whole family that shows up at the end, the Scraggs family, who are Daisy May's relatives from the other side of the track.
Actually,
they actually they're like really dirty and dumb.
And her sleazy uncle that sells her to the Earthquake Magoon.
Yeah.
He also seemed like he also was the only one that seemed like one of the characters from the comic. One of the shambling, dirty, misproportioned characters from the comic. Yeah, it's really. blanded out.
It really looks like
it's really vanilla.
it really looks like a high school production, except for the professionalism of the dance routines, which are
their outfits. Like they look like you're right. The outfits they must just use the same costumes that they use for
there's
Broadway
something about the acting
because they're incredibly simple and incredibly brightly colored. They look like Flintstones clothing.
Yes,
doesn't look anything like what's in the comic. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. Go on.
So I did start to like it more as we went in, because there were certain lines that maybe they were taken from the comics, but I hadn't read them before. Like Daisy May gets this note that says that Earthquake is going to marry her, and it says RSVP at the end, and she's like, "What does that mean?" And then Marion Sam says it means roast skunk, very possible. And there were some.
There are a few lines, and I think it maybe came from the comic. They
might have
very
been
early on,
and they might have been funnier in the comic.
Yeah, definitely. There's a bit early on where a little girl, like 12, 14 years old, comes up and they joke about how maybe they should marry her, and it says, "No, don't be silly, not till a divorce comes through."
Oh, yes.
I thought, Jesus, that'd be a risky joke to tell now.
Yeah.
I just thought, wow.
That would have been a really funny joke in the comic. It would have been, because there's it's a double gag. It's like because it's like those shocking moments where she burns the body, or the cannibalism. You're like, I can't believe this is happening.
There's no joke as risky or as risque as that really going on from that point. I was bored watching this. I didn't start to enjoy it more as it went on. I got more and more bored.
I actually like. So let's talk about the plot, because then we can talk about some of the bits I did like, which were the scenes which were not on the Dog Patch soundstage.
Yes. Okay.
So the plot is basically that, so this guy has proposed to this Earthquake
Magoon.
Magoon has proposed.
The world's dirtiest wrestler.
Yeah, he's declared that he's going to marry Daisy May.
Yep.
He's gotten permission from her
horrible uncle.
And according to the laws, once you've done that, it's set in stone.
And Sadie Hawkins Day, importantly, has been cancelled.
Well, okay, but it's coming up, but now we learn it's going to be cancelled because the U.S. government has decided that Dogpatch has no value,
it's
cultural
the most
value.
Unnecessary place in the United States.
So they're going to use it. They're going to move nuclear bomb testing from the Nevada desert to Dogpatch. So they're going to evacuate the town because they will no longer be in Dogpatch. There will no longer be a Sadie Hawkins race. Therefore, there's no way to get out of this marriage. This is very long. So, okay, at this point, I'm like, okay, the movie's going to be about trying to prove the worth of Dogpatch. No. 20 minutes later, or 10 minutes later, that's resolved because they find out there's this fruit tree which only grows in front of Mammy's house. That little Abner, she's been making a tonic out of it.
It's a yokumberry tree, and she makes yokumberry tonic out of it.
Right. And this is what Abner's been drinking all his life to get big muscles.
That's why he's so buff.
Yeah. And they use it on
Jerry Lewis, isn't it?
No. Jerry Lewis was in the scene.
No, that's right. That's stupid point. No, he used it on a different character.
They use it on like one of the scientists that has come from the big city.
He drinks some Kickapoo Joy Juice.
Kickapoo Joy Juice.
This is another thing that this comic gave to the world. Yes. Kickapoo Joy Juice, which is a soft drink that I think... Yeah, I've had the soft drink. But in the comic, it's a virulently poisonous alcohol.
Right.
So the scientist has a sip of it, he spits it out, and then Earthquake Magoon maliciously gives him some of the tonic to drink to wash away the taste.
Right.
And the tonic, of course, apparently tastes even worse.
Right.
But it turns him into an enormous He-Man. Much like Little Abner.
Yeah. So they decide that they're going to use this. The government wants this.
They want it for their military.
They're going to take a bunch of the husbands from the town, from Dogpatch, to Washington.
Yeah.
And they're going to experiment on them with this hokum juice. Yokumberry
tonic.
Yokumberry tonic. Okay, and then now I can't remember quite what happens, but I remember
General Bull Moose also wants the
right. So this guy's a capitalist, and he doesn't want the government to have it. He wants it for his own company.
He wants to make Coca-Cola.
So he comes up with this whole scheme to get his mistress to
Passionata von Climax.
Passionata von Climax.
It's a horny movie.
Yeah, I like that. I liked her name a lot. And I liked her... So we're getting to the bits that I liked, which were the scenes that were not set in Dogpatch.
Yeah.
I liked her. I liked the actress a lot. There's a great gag where you find out she's been sleeping with the chauffeur, and he's like... And Bull Moose is like, get rid of that, fire that chauffeur, and the two of his henchmen are looking at each other like, that's our job's on the line too, and everybody else in this room.
Yeah, very funny.
and she's really good, and there's some great double entendres and stuff
Yep.
with her. And so his plan is to marry her to...
well, the Sadie Hawkins
Abner.
race is back on
Yes, because they've saved the town.
yeah. Well, it's in abeyance because they're testing the tonic,
Right.
and until they know the results of the tonic, Dogpatch has a stay of execution. And so Sadie Hawkins' day is going ahead.
Yeah.
So General Bullmoose cooks up a scheme where he's going to mess with the race and have Passionata
Yeah.
catch little Abner.
Yeah.
Then they're going to bump him off.
Yeah.
And then they will have the rights to the Yokenberry tonic because for some reason little Abner owns the rights even though it's Mama Yokem that makes it.
Yes, and so part of his plan is he gets this guy named Evil Eye Flegel, who is like a 1940s gangster.
Amazing. He's so funny.
He hangs out in the woods, but
He wears a zoot suit. He's
yeah.
about 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
He wears a zoot suit and he walks around and he talks in
scuttles
this,
around. Yeah,
he scuttles around and he talks in this Brooklyn accent. And I read the comic where he's introduced.
Okay.
I happened to luckily flick across it
Yeah.
when I was doing the prep, and his Brooklyn accent in the comic is so funny to read.
Right.
Goyle. It's so funny. And he has the power to cast a whammy on someone
Right.
with his gaze.
Right.
And which is where we get the expression double whammy from
Right, okay.
Little Abner's from this character.
Okay.
Because the double whammy is more powerful than the single whammy. But he has many varieties of whammy, including one which will make you tell the truth, provided
Right.
you've had a sip of alcohol.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay.
And they hatch a plot.
Yes, so they're gonna stun, they're gonna whammy Abner during the race, and then Passionata's gonna capture him, and they'll be forced to be married. Then they're gonna whammy him again, so he drives his car off a cliff and kills himself, and then she will own the rights to the juice.
Yes, and they get the secret, and they want the secret of making the juice from him by whammying him with the truth telling.
Yes, that's
whammy.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, okay. So then we get. So then Mammy does a ritual, much like she does in the comic, and she sees what's happening in Washington,
Yeah.
and she's like, "Okay, we got to come up with a counter plan." They crash the engagement ball.
Yep.
And then they force the whammy onto Bullmoose, and he tells the truth about his plot to kill Abner.
Yes.
And then he's arrested,
Yes.
and then we get the Sadie Hawk.
No, Sadie Hawkins' race already happened.
Already happened before, so Abner was going to marry her. That's why the
profoundly
engagement
boring
was
scene, which was obviously straight from the stage.
replaced with a
people-
dance. The whole comedy routine was replaced with a dance number,
So silly.
an elaborate dance number.
In the comics, it's really funny, like these horrible, ugly people chasing one another and whacking one another with
Yeah.
clubs,
Yeah.
and dragging them back to their caves or what have you.
Yeah.
And it's this dance number. It's been adapted straight from the Broadway
Yeah.
musical, 100%.
Yeah.
Because it's just like a stage. They do change location, but they come in
Yeah,
from
yeah.
stage right.
Yes.
They do their dance. They exit stage
Yes,
left. It
yes.
just happens over and over. And I was bored to tears. I'm afraid.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. I mean the dances were, like I said,
elaborate, but
they're elaborate and pretty amazing. But if you saw them on stage, you'd be like, "Wow, this is
that'd
pretty
be great. I think I would have really liked to see it as a musical, but as a film, it's really dull.
Yeah, but when they leave Dogpatch, which I don't know if that happens, and I love there's a number where the women see their husbands again after they've been all buffed
Well,
up.
this is right after General Bullmoose has been arrested.
Yeah,
No sooner is he hauled out in handcuffs than a military fellow, an attaché or something, appears and says, "Oh, the results of the tests have come out, but they're not good.
Yeah.
You better come and see for yourselves."
Yeah.
And they round up all the women, because everyone's come up to foil the plot,
yeah,
to this fancy Washington, D.C. ballroom where the reception's being held for the proposed wedding. And they all go back to the laboratory, which is apparently in the same building or very nearby.
Yeah.
And they wait with bated breath. And then these bodybuilders
yeah,
march out,
yeah.
like flexing and posing, and the women are thrilled. They don't understand why this hasn't been considered a success. They're thrilled to bits.
Yeah.
And then the scientist says, "Oh yeah, well why don't you embrace your husband then?" And they go up and make to embrace their husbands, and the husbands just keep posing. They're completely uninterested
Yeah.
in their wives.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Yokenberry tonic, well, what it says is kills your interest in romance.
Yes.
What it does apparently is saps the libido.
Yeah. And they think that's why Abner has no interest in...
That's why in Daisy May, because
that's their reason in the movie. The little bit of retcon, or I don't know what you want to call it. But
definitely a retcon, because in the comics it's very much just because only a fool would want to get married in the comic, right?
Yeah.
Because then you have a nagging wife or whatever. But yeah, in this it's the tonic.
Yeah.
And then it's cured with a bit of a Deus Ex Machina.
Well, actually, it's cured by.
Pappy gives him some water and says it's a counter-tonic.
But it's not a counter-tonic, it's just a placebo.
Yeah, the power of a placebo for curing issues with...
And then he marries Daisy May, which I think they were married in the strip by 56 or something like that. So.
Yes, under public pressure.
Yeah. So I like the scenes in Bull Moose's office, maybe because I like Passionata.
Yeah.
And I like the ballroom scene, and I really like the scene in the lab, which is when we were...
Oh, then they sing a song, don't they? Like, put them back the way they was. And it's
put them back the way they was. Yeah,
and it's full of innuendos.
Yeah. Actually, the reason I chose this movie, or when I was like, should we do this one, or should I do this podcast? I went on YouTube, I was like, okay, Little Abner, what's this like? And it's the clip of that lab scene, and I was like, this movie looks crazy.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought and then I read the comic and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be crazy. This movie's going to be crazy because everything that happens in here is so over the top. There's this train coming through town. He's pulling the mannequin out the window. He's married to the mannequin.
Yeah.
I'm like, this movie's going to be wild. It's going to have stuff like a lab, like the comic. No, there's just 3 or 4 scenes in the movie that are like that. And the rest of it is the Dog Patch song and dance numbers.
Yes, absolutely. And even in some of and I have to mention this because my wife said I had to mention it. There's some real gross sexism in there too. There's one song where Daisy May sings about getting old.
Yeah.
It's a throwaway gag with that 12-year-old girl getting divorced. That's naughty and funny.
Yeah.
When it's a woman in her 20s singing a song about getting over the hill and how horrible it is to age.
I think it's supposed to be a joke, but it's not landing as a joke.
Absolutely not landing as a joke.
I think they're supposed to be. Isn't it funny? This young woman is singing about being old, but it's just
laboured and drawn out, and she's singing it with this older man as well as singing along. And it's grotesque, actually.
Yeah.
And there are a few, not too many, but there are a few moments like that in the.
And there's a Native American stereotype that's running around. He's like the only one in there in 1959. It's pretty rough. He's probably a character from the comic, but it's still hard to watch now.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, he's the one that brings the Kickapoo Joy Juice. He talks about, heat big fire water and.
Yes.
Very very cringe-inducing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I think I know exactly where we're gonna fall on the yays and nays.
I couldn't agree more.
But let's do them anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I want to say that this is such a great follow-up to our week on Friday Foster.
Okay.
Because it's the exact opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is.
I'm going to give the exact opposite answers to these 3 questions that I gave for Friday Foster.
Excellent. Okay, here we go. Comic strip, yay or nay?
Yay.
Oh yeah.
100% yay. It's of its time.
Yeah.
You have to be ready for that going, but it's still so funny. It's just crackling with humor and wit.
Yeah.
And the art is great.
Yeah, so I think especially that period which we fell into, which was like, was it 46, did I say? 46, 47.
Yeah.
When he's, his art is kind of at his peak and he's not in the super repetitive zone and he's not sick of it himself yet. He hasn't become super conservative or whatever. This is probably peak era. It's as yay as it gets. I can't believe how great it was. And
compared to Friday Foster, which was, despite being a landmark comic for its time, was actually quite boring.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the movie, yay or nay?
That's a nay.
Yeah, nay for me too, although it had moments. And I don't know, maybe go on YouTube and look at that scene in the lab.
Look at it, yeah.
Maybe go on YouTube if you can find the Passionata Vaughn climax scene.
Where she has the fur and...
Oh, yeah.
And he says, did you shoot it yourself?
Did you shoot yourself? That's
She's trying to show off her physique.
Yeah.
And he just looks at the fur.
The mink collar she's wearing. My God, that moment was funny. And those bits were funny.
And he says, and how do you usually hunt? And she goes, oh, usually I just put myself out as bait.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, yeah, and how do you do that? And she goes, just breathe in and out mostly.
Yeah, and she's actually exposed to cleavage at this point.
It's quite funny.
Yeah, it's really good. Her scenes were, if you can find, maybe those scenes are on YouTube. I would recommend
anything with
seeing those
Stupefying
bits.
Jones. I think this was...
yeah, maybe try to find that Jerry Lewis moment. It's probably on YouTube.
I think it was Julie Newmar's... it was kind of her break, I think.
It might have been. We're looking at 5-6 years before Batman,
I think it was a big break.
Yeah. She seems to be a robot or something, so she doesn't have much to do, but she looks fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, adaptation, yay or nay?
That's nay.
Yeah.
Everything it's just such a toned down, insipid, colourless, although it's colourful.
Yeah.
Like, it looks like everything that was subversive and kind of crackling with menace and wit in the comic is absent from the film.
I think I actually wrote a note that I don't know what I meant, but I wrote, because I was writing very quickly as I was watching, songs violate the premise of the comic. And I'm not sure why I wrote that, but I think somehow singing the lines, it made things too orderly in some sense. The thinking patterns of people that are supposed to be unpredictable.
It's not chaotic enough. Yeah, there's a lot of chaos in the comic.
Yeah.
A lot of frenetic.
Yeah, maybe that's what I meant by that.
I can see what you mean.
I think the actor, really, the main actor, I can't remember his name, really looks like Lil Abner.
He's fine.
He's well cast for that, just based on looks alone. Otherwise, there's not much to recommend it, I guess.
Not a good adaptation. Whereas going back to Friday Foster.
Yeah.
Like, I can see why blaxploitation as a genre, you couldn't look more different from this kind of saccharine musical adaptations from the 50s. I can see why it was such a phenomenon to have. I mean, obviously, there's quite a gap of 20 years.
Yeah.
But watching this and thinking I would rather be watching Friday Foster as I was watching this. I can see why these films in the 70s were such a breath of air, because if this is what Hollywood was turning out, this kind of saccharine.
Yeah, I don't know about how successful this movie actually was either, and it doesn't look like it was that expensive because it's all basically
the same set. They just carved the sets.
And they didn't need to have that many rehearsals because they were using the same cast.
I think they use the same costumes because it looks like costumes made for the stage. They have no detail. They're just brightly coloured. They look like I said, like Flintstone costumes.
Right.
It's a shame.
And I think after I watched it, I was humming one of the songs, the one about Cornpone, the founder of the town.
That's about the only one I was humming as well. That was
kind of stuck in my head for a few hours, and then by the next day it was... Yes, there you go. But by the next day, for me, it was gone. So
the songs are not memorable at all. That was another thing about it, not memorable songs, I guess serviceable.
But I noticed on the Wikipedia it said this is still often performed by high schools, and I can see why, because it's kind of at that level where you could train a bunch of 18-year-olds to sing these songs and do this really broad comedy. Yes. The version of the comedy here is very broad compared to the comics. So
that's exactly, yes, it is broad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Compared to the kind of like sharp, kind of needle sharp stuff from the comic. Yeah, broad. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, something else I wanted to maybe start doing is that if people start listening to the show, is announce next week's one. Because I've been springing these on you after we've turned off the recording, but I usually have decided what it's going to be. And next week's is going to be Tamara Drew by Posey Simmons.
Oh, okay. I have no idea what that is.
Excellent. That's the way much like Lil Abner, that's the way it's probably going to be most of the time.
Fantastic.
So, look forward to that.